Sup, chooms? So, some of you guys may not know this, but I am an avid fan of cats. I own two of them, in fact, a male and a female, and they're both fixed, so they won't be getting the nasty on anytime soon and leaving me with a litter of kittens to raise. They're both gray tabby cats, and they're named Yorvith and Yennefer. They are extremely sweet, and I named them after Witcher characters because they love to watch me play The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which is my favorite game of all time. And as much as I love Cyberpunk 2077, I still think The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is CD Projekt Red's finest work ever. I think cats are probably one of the greatest companion animals ever. They're basically just friends who hang out with you at your house, who you have to feed and change their litter box every now and then. Compared to a dog, they're much lower maintenance, which is good for me because I don't want anything getting in the way of my precious leisure time. So of course, being that I am both a very heavy minoxidil user as well as a cat owner, the anecdotal reports I have heard about minoxidil being lethally poisonous to cats obviously concerns me greatly, and I imagine they're a subject of concern to other minoxidil using cat owners as well. So for the sake of my fellow cat loving chooms, I have decided to do some research to confirm whether or not minoxidil is as bad for cats as people say it is, or if the research behind it is misleading or perhaps exaggerated, as is often the case when it comes to subjects for the treatment of hair loss. So being that minoxidil is the active ingredient behind two FDA-approved medications, including Rogaine and Lonatin, the first being topical minoxidil and the latter being oral minoxidil, it is unsurprising that there are quite a few animal studies on minoxidil, since during preclinical trials, drugs will use animal subjects before moving on to human subjects in their pathway towards FDA approval. So, as it turns out, minoxidil is relatively non-toxic in rats, monkeys, and mini pigs. However, if you are a dog lover, brace yourself because I have some bad news. Because in dog studies, oral minoxidil consistently caused cardiac lesions, though topical minoxidil appears to be safe, although you may want to make sure your hands are clean after applying minoxidil if your dog has the habit of licking your hands. But as far as the cat research goes, we have a study which is two case reports of cats who tragically died when coming into contact with topical minoxidil. So, in case report number 1, we have a 3-year-old male cat who had 1 drop of topical minoxidil applied to an area of alopecia. Now, the case report doesn't disclose exactly what percentage of minoxidil it was or what exact quantity they meant when they said 1 drop, but as a result of the cat coming into contact with the topical minoxidil, the cat ended up developing loss of appetite, lethargy, and trouble breathing. Liver test and kidney blood tests were abnormal. An X-ray showed fluid in the lungs, and the cat later died despite veterinary treatment, which of course is heartbreaking, but at least the study did yield some useful data for us. An autopsy on the cat showed fluid in the lungs and the lung cavity, and the cat also had pericardial effusion, which means there was fluid buildup around the heart, which of course is a bad thing since that increases pressure around the heart and can interfere with the cardiac output. There was also swelling in the heart muscle and evidence of myocardial ischemia, meaning lack of oxygen to the heart, which caused a massive heart attack and heart failure. Interestingly, many of these sides, particularly pericardial effusion, have been reported with oral minoxidil usage in humans, so this is something to consider since oral minoxidil's popularity with hair loss sufferers has skyrocketed in the past few months. I'll go ahead and link the video I did on oral minoxidil below if you want to learn more about that, but don't tell Reddit my opinions on oral minoxidil since they tend to get very triggered by it. So what was especially remarkable though was just the sheer lethality of topical minoxidil in cats. Amazingly, it was just 1 drop of minoxidil which caused these terrible events to happen, which is pretty worrisome if you are a cat owner, and I know a lot of minoxidil users do own cats, of course. So let's look at the second case and see if the results were any different maybe. The second case in this report involved a 7-year-old male cat, and the owner of the cat had applied an unknown amount of 5% minoxidil to an area of alopecia on the cat, and 3 days later the cat was hospitalized with lethargy and trouble breathing. Again, similar symptoms to what we saw with the last cat. The body temperature of the cat was low, and chest x-rays again showed pulmonary edema, meaning fluid in the lungs. The cat died an agonizing death 10 hours after being admitted to the hospital. Autopsy results showed fluid in the lungs and inflammation of the heart. So once again, the heart and lungs were absolutely demolished by just regular 5% over-the-counter minoxidil, which is pretty disturbing data so far. So let's take a look at the discussion part of the paper. Here, the authors note that oral minoxidil has a short half-life, but its effects are delayed and long-lasting due to the metabolism of oral minoxidil into its active metabolite, minoxidil sulfate, via the sulfotransferase enzyme in the liver. So even oral minoxidil requires the sulfotransferase enzyme in order to work, so people who are non-responders to topical minoxidil shouldn't assume they'll respond better with oral minoxidil, and it's probably a better idea to just use 0.1% tretinoin with topical minoxidil, as that has been proven to be safe in increasing the sulfotransferase enzyme directly on the scalp. And that's probably a better idea than taking a risk with a dangerous drug like Lonatin. So even though the half-life of oral minoxidil is only 3 to 4 hours in humans, its effects last at least 24 hours due to the active metabolite minoxidil sulfate. The liver, besides metabolizing minoxidil to its active metabolite, minoxidil sulfate, also metabolizes minoxidil into inactive metabolites, which is very important for the elimination of minoxidil from the body. Minoxidil and all of its metabolites are then eventually excreted in the urine, so eventually any minoxidil that gets in the bloodstream is just pissed out. Topical minoxidil is very minimally absorbed, and the absorption depends on the area of the application, the carrier, as well as the condition of the skin. So in animal studies, 5 to 36% of the drug can be absorbed systemically through though the absorption is very, very slow, resulting in lower blood levels than what we see with something like oral minoxidil. Also, oral minoxidil is over 90% absorbed into the bloodstream, and that's right away because you take it orally rather than just let it sit on the scalp for hours at a time. So if you look at the package inserts of oral and topical minoxidil, the maximum blood concentration from using 5% topical minoxidil twice daily was 1.11 nanograms per milliliter, whereas 1 milligram of oral minoxidil results in blood levels of 16 to 24 nanograms per milliliter, pretty much 20 times higher than topical minoxidil, and we're still seeing people who claim that using 2 milligrams or even 5 milligrams daily is just a small dose of oral minoxidil. And I only bring this up because there are still people who try to claim or make the claim that oral minoxidil is no worse than topical minoxidil, since topical minoxidil absorbs systemically too, which is true, but the extent of systemic absorption, when you consider how slow the rate is nowhere even remotely close to what oral minoxidil will do immediately after ingestion. In fact, the authors of the study mention a case of a human suicide attempt with oral minoxidil that caused profound low blood pressure, tachycardia, pleural effusion, meaning fluid around the lungs, and then very slow heartbeat. The patient required several days in the ICU to recover. However, no cases of overdose due to topical administration have ever been seen in humans. And I imagine if we were to flat out take a bath in topical minoxidil, this probably wouldn't happen just because of the slow rate of absorption. So, sorry to oral minoxidil fans, but there is a good reason why the FDA formulated a topical minoxidil solution rather than just approving Lonatin for hair loss, and their research is much more reliable than the testimonials of a few bro scientists on social media. But let's go ahead and get back onto the subject. So, like I said before, oral minoxidil in dogs is particularly bad for their hearts, causing coronary artery injury, arterial hemorrhage, and ventricular necrosis. But topical minoxidil in dogs doesn't cause any problems, which again goes to show that topical minoxidil is much safer than oral minoxidil, so this is of course good news for dog fans at least. Sadly, the news for cat lovers is bad, as cats in this report died from pulmonary edema and heart failure. Seemingly this was from topical administration, though it is possible the cats ingested some minoxidil orally by grooming, as cat owners know how cats like to lick themselves quite a lot. So the authors speculate that cats are at an increased risk from minoxidil compared to humans and other animals, in part because they are so small, and also due to the possibility that through grooming they may take it orally, just like I just said. But probably the biggest risk factor for cats is because felines are deficient in the liver enzyme that breaks minoxidil down into its inactive metabolites. This may result in increased conversion of minoxidil to minoxidil sulfate, which is the active metabolite, which will cause blood serum minoxidil sulfate levels to skyrocket into levels which are lethal to cats. They didn't do blood levels of minoxidil or minoxidil sulfate on the cats, so this is just a speculation, but it seems logical this would be the reason minoxidil is so toxic to cats. So, does this mean that if you're a cat owner, you should just throw out your minoxidil and just shave it, bro? Well, No. It does mean, though, that there are a few precautions you likely should take. So first of all, always make sure your minoxidil is in an area where cats cannot reach it. Keep it in a sealed medicine cabinet and keep the cap on always when you're not using it. Make sure you clean up any spills immediately if they happen, and also make sure to thoroughly wash your hands after applying minoxidil. A big issue is that many people go to bed with minoxidil on their scalps, and cats sometimes like to cuddle with their owners by sleeping next to their scalp, so that can put the cat in great danger. A much better thing to do would be to apply the minoxidil in the middle of the day and then wash it out before going to bed. Now, I know minoxidil is greasy and it takes forever to dry, which makes it aesthetically displeasing, so what you should do is you use minoxidil foam instead of the liquid. Now, I know the big problem with the minoxidil foam, especially with people who have long hair, is that a lot of it gets lost on the hair instead of going on the scalp. Since the foam tends to expand, it gets lost on the hair. Fortunately, there is a workaround hack where you can actually melt the foam directly into a liquid and then apply it like you would a liquid. But fortunately, unlike standard liquid minoxidil, it will dry much faster and help you avoid that greasy look liquid minoxidil often causes. Foam minoxidil tends to have a mousse-like effect on your scalp, and a lot of people actually like the way it makes their hair look, so this might be a good solution for minoxidil users who own cats and would prefer to use it in the middle of the day when they're less likely to expose their scalps to their cats. Also, even though the FDA recommends using topical minoxidil twice daily, it's important to remember that topical minoxidil has a 22-hour half-life, so for many of us, just using the treatment once per day is probably good enough. So cat owners who just want to use it in the middle of the day, say like when they're at work or something, and then just wash it off when they're at home, that's probably good enough for most of us. I mean, minoxidil only needs about 4 hours to fully absorb it into their skin anyways. Now, I will say one thing about the minoxidil foam is that it still tends to dry out the scalp a little bit. So if you have some issues with dry scalp, what you can do is that you can just mix a teaspoon of jojoba or yoyoba. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I say jojoba oil, but you can actually just mix that into your conditioner and just let it sit on your scalp for about 5 minutes or so. And that tends to counter any dryness issues that minoxidil, whether it be the liquid or the foam, causes. And that's what I do. And it helps quite a bit. And I also have a video tutorial on how to turn foam minoxidil into liquid minoxidil, and I'll link that below for anyone who is interested in it. So sometimes, even though we take a lot of precautions, accidents do happen. So what should you do if your cat does get exposed to minoxidil? First, make sure you wash and scrub the exposed area on the cat with dish detergent. Hand soaps are usually too gentle and may not clean well enough to get all the minoxidil off, so dish detergent is preferred, even though regular soap is still probably better than nothing. Even if the exposure is not immediate and happens many hours ago, you still want to make sure you wash the area of the skin affected very thoroughly, because minoxidil can still be present hours after it was first applied on the skin. If the exposure is oral, though, like let's say the cat licks your hand after you apply minoxidil, or the cat licks your scalp, the cat will need its stomach pumped ASAP. This is not something that can be safely done at home, so make sure the cat gets veterinary care as soon as possible, and they will either pump the stomach or they will apply an emetic drug, which is a drug that induces vomiting. Both of the cats who died in these case reports had some delay before they were brought to the hospital, so it's possible that with more aggressive and earlier treatment, they may have lived. So don't assume there is no hope for your cat if he or she gets exposed. Stay calm and get help as soon as you can. The bottom line, though, is that as much as I'd like to be able to tell you guys that minoxidil's toxicity to cats is just some sort of slaphead fear-mongering and propaganda, the truth is that there are some real risks. Be careful with your cats, make sure you clean up your spills, don't let them lick your hands or your hair, and keep the minoxidil bottles sealed and far away from them. All this is just a reminder that minoxidil at its core is a dangerous drug, which is only safe under certain circumstances, such as when it is applied topically to human scalps. So, cat owners such as myself, we don't have to choose between our hair and the safety of our fuzz children. We just have to take extra precautions the same way we would in the case, for instance, of having a household with human children that also has firearms and alcohol in it. So it doesn't mean we have to stop using minoxidil, it just means showing a bit of extra responsibility. And for me, my hair and fuzz children are certainly worth the extra effort. And with that, I'll see you homies next time. Have a good one.